You know, if they went and applied for a loan last week expecting a 0.5% drop because they knew that the Fed dropped interest rates by 0.5%, then they were disappointed. Welcome back to the Numbers and the Nuance. My name is Christopher McGee. This is my man Dora Aldino.
What's up, guys? I'm Dora.
This is where you come every week in order to know exactly what Utah's housing market is looking like. This week, I think you're going to be able to stay awake, yeah?
Yes.
You did a little, shadow boxing before you walked in. I'll give you my nuanced opinion of exactly what's going on in Utah's housing market based on numbers coming right off the MLS. And then I'll just show you those numbers in the charts. You can see for yourself where things are. Okay, things are trending essentially as they have been for the last little while here. Inventory continues to travel up, that's good. Days on market continues to travel up. You'll see in the charts it looks like it's sort of coming down and then going up. That's true because we're starting that chart from the beginning of April still. Next week, these charts will start from the beginning of the third quarter, not the beginning of the second quarter. So the trends will start to look different. But if we look at days on market across the last like half of that chart, we'll see that it's been on its way up. Average list price really remaining stagnant, and our demand as measured by the number of homes sold is still looking like it's on its way down moderately as we head into cooler months. However, interestingly, interest rates dropping may have precipitated the pickup that we've seen across the last few weeks in the number of homes currently under contract. And that's two ways to look at our current demand. We can look at it on the front end of people's interest in buying homes in terms of how many homes are under contract right now. We can look at it on the back end in terms of how many homes were sold last week. Sold last week still looks like a moderate decline, which we would expect heading into colder months, like I said. But that interest rate dropping may have precipitated the relative upswing in demand that we're seeing as measured by the number of homes currently under contract. Interest rates are the interesting thing this week. Last week, I think a lot of people were confused because people knew that the Fed had its meeting. They had signaled that they planned on cutting rates at least 0.25%. They ended up cutting rates a full 0.5%, and then mortgage interest rates didn't change across from like last week from the week before, right?
Do you think that caused uproar?
Uproar? No, there's no like mobs in the streets or anything. But I mean,
some complaints.
Yeah, certainly individuals, and definitely I wouldn't hear about it as much as like loan officers, lenders would hear about it more, right?
Right.
When people applying for a loan, you know, if they went and applied for a loan last week expecting a 0.5% drop because they knew that the Fed dropped interest rates by 0.5%, then they were disappointed. Yeah, and I don't know what kind of conversations happened between individuals applying for loans and lenders. Actually, I have some idea because one of the lenders I like to work with most sent me a text that was like, listen, everybody's upset about this. Explain it this way. Let me just take a moment and describe why interest rates didn't fall, why mortgage interest rates didn't fall last week. Our banking system requires each individual bank at the end of any given day to keep a certain amount of funds in reserve. So if at the end of the day, a bank doesn't have enough money in its vault or stored in central bank accounts, then they have to borrow money in order to meet their reserve requirements, and they borrow it just from other banks. At the end of any given day, some banks will have an excess in reserve and some banks will be low on reserve. And when they borrow money from each other, there's an interest rate charged them by the banks, and that is the federal funds interest rate. That is the interest rate that is like the core or the baseline from which all interest rates in the market are based. Because if the bank is going to make money by lending money to you and me, then they have to charge more than they were charged in order to get the money they needed in reserve. The Fed did meet last week, and they did in fact drop interest rates, but they dropped federal funds interest rates by 0.5 percentage points. And we didn't see a corresponding drop in mortgage interest rates because the Fed doesn't directly control mortgage interest rates. The lenders control that interest rate, and usually we can expect it to be roughly 1.5% higher than whatever the federal funds interest rate is. The banks, the lenders, had seen already all the economic indicators that the Fed saw for them to come out and say, the next time we meet, we anticipate cutting rates. And they were signaling they'd cut it by at least 0.25%, maybe 0.5%. And since they tend to run conservative on these things, most of us expected just 0.25%. 0.25%. It came out, they dropped a full percentage, a full quarter, 0.5%. But the lenders, the actual people who give out mortgage interest loans, not mortgage interest loans, but mortgage loans, the lenders had already priced into the way they do mortgage interest rates the cut that they anticipated the Fed would make on the federal funds rate. That's why mortgage interest rates didn't drop already, because we've seen mortgage interest rates drop over the last couple of months. That is the drop that we anticipated the Fed would make. So it was already priced in. That's why interest rates, mortgage interest rates, didn't drop over this last week.
Do you think they will? Like, do you think the bank will kind of say, okay, this is kind of unfair right now to the people that want to take out a loan? Do you think they'll, kind of match it just so it's like similar to the drop?
No, because it's not about what the people need. It's not. Well, and here's the thing. On a macro zoomed out scale, it is based on what the people need, but it's not based on like any given segment of people. So if a certain percentage of people are like, hey, we are trying to pull out a loan right now and buy a home, that won't beat out the other economic indicators that the Fed is looking at in order to decide when and how much they drop rates. They have signaled that they intend to continue to cut rates. And as they continue to cut the federal funds interest rate, mortgage interest rates will meet. They will stay at about 1.5% difference between. So as the federal funds interest rate drops, mortgage interest rates will drop as well. And they've signaled that that is the plan throughout this year and moving into next year. So next year will probably easily be in the 5s. Okay, let's go ahead and check out the numbers. Okay, our inventory currently sits at 11,277. That's up a bit from the previous week and still trending up, as you can see. Average days on market bumped up one more day from the week prior to this last week to 50. It was at 49, so it's on its way up. It's not climbing up a cliff, but it's on its way up. Average list price prior week hopped down significantly to $631,383 for the average list price of a home. That's down from the prior week, but as you can see, that keeps our trend pretty stagnant. Now, average sold price last week came to $620,623, and that's down also from the previous week. So now the difference between average list price and average sold price remained again in the buyer's favor, not like 2 weeks ago when it skyrocketed to like a million whatever. Makes our chart look really weird, but as you'll see, the difference now is $10,760 in the buyer's favor. A little bit closer to no difference between those two numbers from the previous week, but that's the difference between list and sold as of last week. Okay, the number of homes sold last week came to 518. That's up from last week, but by 1. So really it's the same. Last week it was 517, and our homes sold chart, as you can see, is trending moderately down. The number of homes currently under contract comes to 5,103, up from the previous week. Like we were saying in the nuance part of this video, that's up 3-4 weeks in a row now. And I like to think that in real estate, a 1 week number jump in any given direction doesn't really show us a trend, but 3-4 weeks in, we're starting to see a trend. So we're trending up on the number of homes that are going under contract. And I think that's already the result that we're seeing of slightly increased demand based on interest rates dropping. The number of price reductions, the number of times that a home seller thought, in order to attract a buyer, I better drop my asking price. That happened 1,170 times last week, up a little bit from the week before. If you look at the last half of this, if you look at this chart in full, it looks like there's this dramatic upswing here, this trend up. But if you look at like the last half of this chart, it's looking pretty volatile, but hovering about where it is right now. Last week, the number of listing contracts that were either canceled or expired or withdrawn from the MLS came to 324, down a little bit from the previous week, trending moderately up as we head into cooler months, as you can see. And finally, the interest rates for a 30-year fixed rate conventional loan came to 6.15. That's as it is this morning when I looked. Up just the tiniest touch from last week's 6.12%. That's it for this week, guys. If you've got any questions, hit us in the comments. We're gonna be happy to respond. If you or anybody that you know is interested in moving, selling and or buying a home in Utah in the coming months, feel free to reach out to us. We're gonna be happy to help. And as always, if you wanna stay educated on Utah's housing market, there's not gonna be a better way than to hit that subscribe button and stay educated with us week to week. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
Deuces.
Deuces.